Members, it's the appointed time. We have a quorum. I call the meeting to order. On the agenda today, there are two papers for discussion. The government submitted paper, and that's an information paper, ECI 2024-25, number 10. That paper sets out changes in the directorate establishment approved since 2002, and also the implication of the items today if they are passed. I would draw members' attention to the fact that if you have any direct or indirect interest in any under discussion today, please disclose the nature of such pecuniary interest before you speak on that item. That's in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. Please also note Rule 84 of the ROP, which governs voting involving a direct pecuniary interest. Item 1 on the agenda, that's EC bracket 2024-25, number 9. That's about the Fire Services Department. It's a proposal to retain a time-limited supernumerary post of Deputy Chief Fire Officer at DSC1, Discipline Services Chief 1, or D1 equivalent, with effect from the 1st of April this year or with immediate effect upon approval by the Finance Committee, whichever is later, up to the 31st of March 2028. That's for the continuous formulation, implementation, and steering of the execution of various measures related to fire safety policies and buildings, including commercial, composite, and domestic and industrial buildings, with a view to enhancing fire safety standards of old buildings. On the 3rd of December 2024, the administration briefed the panel on security on turning this post into a permanent post. But in light of the community concerns about the government's finances, the Security Bureau has now proposed extending or renewing this supernumerary post instead. Joining us today for the meeting are Mr. Michael Chek, Undersecretary for Security, and also his team, where people from not just the Security Bureau, but also from the Fire Services Department. First, Ms. Carmen Khan, the chairwoman of the panel on security, will brief us on the gist of the discussion at the panel level. Thank you, Chairman. The panel on security discussed at its meeting on the 3rd of December 2024 the proposed conversion of a time-limited supernumerary post of Deputy Chief Fire Officer Building Improvement in the Fire Services Department into a permanent post. Members noted that the post holder would mainly steer and supervise the implementation of 3 ordinances about the fire safety of old commercial buildings, old composite and domestic buildings, and old industrial buildings. The work would cover the defaulted works mechanism and other related measures introduced by the recently amended Fire Safety Buildings Ordinance, or FSBO. The post holder will also have to review the success of existing facilitation measures and devise new measures to resolve the technical problems faced by building owners, to improve the overall fire safety standard of regulated old buildings. Members focused on the administration's performance indicators for these key tasks and the Fire Services Department's strategy for cases of failure to actively comply with the requirements of the FSBO. Besides, since the administration had proposed making this time-limited supernumerary post permanent, members asked about the long-term plans for the duties of this post after all old buildings complied with the 3 ordinances. The administration responded to members' questions and concerns at the meeting. The panel had no objection to submitting the proposal to this subcommittee for scrutiny. That's all from me. Thank you, Ms. Khan. Undersecretary, do you wish to say a few words? Thank you, Chairman. Old buildings usually come with fire safety hazards. At the New Lucky House last year, there was a fire, and that led to community concern. So after taking on board all members' views, we amended CAP 5725 Safety Buildings Ordinance. Last July, we submitted the bill to Electrical for scrutiny, and then last December, the bill received its 3rd reading and was passed. and that enabled the FSD and the buildings department to perform defaulted works for the building owners. That's to improve the fire safety standards of old buildings. Ever since this post of Deputy Chief Fire Officer was created, the post holder had improved fire standard. The officer-led inspections, they covered more than 1,000 old buildings with higher fire hazards. They stepped up the enforcement actions. As at the end of last year, the FSD also conducted more than 8,200 buildings and issued many fire safety notices. Those operations addressed fire safety hazards. Reviewing the fire safety policies and developing strategies to support occupiers and owners as they comply with fire safety laws are ongoing work for this DCFO. There's a need for this post holder to take forward a pilot scheme for defaulted works. This post holder will also have to develop long-term strategies. The DCFO has also set up a building improvement support center. It's now in Tai Kok Tsui. And that's before we have new resources. There are plans to set up such centers, one in Wan Chai and another in Yuen Long. That's to provide one-stop services to building owners. There's also a community support team. Since the inception of this center, we have received more than 13,000 visits or calls. The support team also went on an outreach program, contacted 4,200 cases to remind them to comply with fire safety standards. Now, we have also provided information kits to old buildings. We also helped old buildings to set up teams to work on fire safety. And for all that work, the FSD has not requested further or new resources. The FSD has also announced plans to set up a new office for user tests when it comes to fire safety works. And again, the FSD is requesting no new resources for that work. Last December, we briefed the panel on security. The plan was to convert this time-limited post into a permanent post. But given the government's finances, we have adopted members' views, so we decide to keep this post as a time-limited supernumerary post for another 3 years so that the post holder can take forward work on the fire safety of old buildings. This proposal is well justified, and I hope members will support this. 30 members are waiting to speak. We have 2 items for today, so I have to enforce time limits. So let's do 4 minutes per member. Now, I will draw a line after the 13th member speaks. Dr. Tik Ji-yun, I wish everyone a happy new year of the snake. I oppose this proposal. As the Undersecretary rightly said, there are new tasks, new challenges for the government. But extending supernumerary posts is not the way to go. Can we go for greater efficiency? Can we improve procedures? Can we make greater use of technology? The Financial Secretary announced no new growth in the establishment, but there's a backdoor by creating supernumerary posts. Over the past 3 years, the government added more than 50 supernumerary directorate posts. You add up the cost, that's $300 million. When you keep adding supernumerary posts, people wonder whether the government is serious about cutting expenditures. And then the FS also announced recently that there was room for cuts in education and healthcare, so the government is targeting services for grassroots. So the government keeps expanding, but people have to tighten their belt. Do you think the public will find this acceptable? So, Undersecretary, will you consider withdrawing this proposal to ride out the tough times together with the public. Undersecretary. Thank you. The FSD has its plate full. The fire safety hazards of old buildings are real. This Deputy Chief Fire Officer's work is important. The FSD has been deploying its internal resources to provide better services. But you can only go that far with redeploying internal resources. That's why we're only asking for keeping this post for 3 more years. Electrical scrutiny will remain in place before we can go further. We believe this is the appropriate approach. Dr. Tick. I have made my point. Now, the lineup: Mr. Gary Chen, Mr. Edmund Wong, Dr. So Chun Wing, Mr. Chao Siu Chung, Dr. Lo Kwok, Mr. Perry Yu, Mr. Benson Lok, Dr. Sari Lee, Mr. Brave Chen, Mr. Holden Chow, Mr. Kingsley Wong, and Ms. Lillian Kwok, Mr. Gary Chen. The post holder has been doing the work. The community agrees that the fire safety hazards of old buildings need to be addressed quickly. There is a need to keep this post. The post holder will cover the work not just under CAP 572, but also other policies about improving fire safety for old buildings. Electrical has been asking the government to move faster with inspecting old buildings. If we deny this proposal, we are not being consistent. So we want the cake. We want to have the cake and eat it. The problem is serious with old buildings. Just look at New Lucky House, number 3 alarm fire. That emphasized the urgency of the problem. At the panel on security, members unanimously supported this post, and that covered creating and keeping this post. Lives are at stake. It is a pressing matter. I do have a question for the Undersecretary. I'm looking at the figures as at the December 2023. The latest figure as at October 2023, 10,900 targeted buildings were inspected by the FSD and the BD. It's 100,000 buildings. But FSDs were given to 270,000 buildings. Only 100,000 buildings complied the directions or had these directions discharged, so roughly 40%. 60% of the buildings have outstanding problems. So my question for the Undersecretary is, with this time-limited supernumerary post, do we have a goal of addressing the problem with those 60% of buildings? That's how you can live up to electrical's expectations. Standards will come out for basic housing units. There will be regulation, and that covers fire safety. My question is, will this post here cover the work for BHUs? As I said, 170,000 buildings are outstanding when it comes to FSDs and inspections. And then this post holder will have to cover BHUs as well, while the previous task remains to be done. Can that post holder cope with the work? Now, the member mentioned the compliance rate. Indeed, compliance rate is at 40%. Now, for non-compliance without reasonable excuse, that rate stands at 20%. As for the rest, they're making some progress. Compliance with fire safety directions is complex. Say a building received 16 directions. They have complied with only 15. That counts as not fully complying. Our target is 100% compliance rate. But when we view this matter from a different angle, the focus is on building improvement for old buildings. That's for this post holder. The point with the amended CAP 572 is defaulted works. That's for people, owners who really want the improvement works, but they struggle with arranging the works for various reasons because the owners are old, they lack an OC, etc. Those buildings require urgent attention. So phase one for us, we want to target 10 buildings, and then starting from the second year, 20 to 60 buildings. That's for the pilot scheme. It depends on the experience we get in the process. Defaulted works are for buildings that cannot comply in the lease, so we want to target those buildings first. Now for BHUs, those are new buildings. Those fall into a different category. Another chief fire officer will cover that. For this post holder will focus on old buildings, fire safety hazards.
Mr. M. Wong. Thank you, Chairman. This position of the FSD has always been a supernumerary post. I know that our budget is tight and we have to be careful with the creation of retention of any post, but I think that we should retain it in order to enhance fire safety. Mr. Chakakan quoted a lot of numbers. It's difficult for us to ask all buildings to comply with all of the directions with so many pending cases. I believe that the problem cannot be solved within 3 years. The administration just now said that they will come back within 3 years to ask for another round of extension of the supernumerary post. And as set out in the paper, it's difficult for other staff of the FSD to take up the work. I don't think that the problem of fire safety in old buildings can be resolved even within 30 years. I wonder if the administration will consider resources consolidation so that the duties can be taken up by existing staff. My second question, we attach a lot of importance to fire safety. A fire officer called me in the middle of the night, and that officer was from Causeway Bay Fire Station. And the officer calling me did not receive any overtime pay, I believe, for informing me about the ambassador scheme that the Undersecretary mentioned. How much resources has been dedicated to fire prevention? Thank you. Thank you for your support. On building improvement, for buildings that do not comply with the directions at all, we will step up patrol in the first quarter this year. We are going to deploy a building improvement special duty team that is led by the post holder, that is the Deputy Chief Fire Officer. On fire prevention, we have adopted a lot of technology to enhance the efficiency and ensure the safety of our officers when they try to put out fire. We also put in place a lot of fire prevention design in a lot of buildings. Currently, only the FSD is qualified to conduct risk assessment and audit the inspections. First, I believe that we have to work on the hardware and also work on our officers' safety. Very often, when our officers patrol the buildings, they figured out that a lot of means of escapes were being obstructed and the smoke door was kept open. When we discover such problems, we issue fixed penalty notices. As far as I understand, the FSD is using artificial intelligence in their backup system or backend system to analyze how manpower redeployment should be made within the department. Hopefully, with the backend system, we have sufficient information to deploy manpower resources. Thank you. I know that the department has adopted the technology, but according to paragraph 30 and 31, I see that the administration has reviewed the alternatives to the retention of the supernumerary post. I hope that the administration will look into how we can absorb the duties within the existing establishment. That's my comment. Thank you. As I mentioned, after 3 members have spoken, I will draw the line. Now, Mr. So Chong-wing, or Dr. So Chong-wing. After the New Lucky House fire incident, the Fire Safety Building Ordinance was being amended. So I support the retention of this supernumerary post. Just now, the Undersecretary said that they originally proposed to turn this supernumerary post into a permanent one, but now they changed their mind. I think that this is the right move. But the duties of this officer has to do with the life and property of the people. I think that there should be better planning. But I think that is perhaps better for us to turn it into a permanent post so that the Deputy Chief Fire Officer would be able to formulate long-term plans for the department. I see that the FSD is working with the Buildings Department and the Home Affairs Department. I'd like to ask about the synergy effect of your collaboration. Can you share with us the relevant information? What duties are shouldered by the FSD? Undersecretary, thank you. On building improvement, we work mostly with the Buildings Department. To better serve the community, the 2 departments are conducting joint inspections. We issue directions to buildings. And our Building Improvement Support Center will support relevant owners and occupiers. And when we organize meetings, we invite staff from the Buildings Department. We have great communication. For our Home Affairs Department, we work with them mostly on the establishment of owners' corporation and application for government subsidy. We don't see any problems with interdepartmental collaboration. Any follow-up questions? No. Next, Mr. Chao Xue-chung. Thank you, Chairman. The post proposed to be retained has everything to do with the life and property of the people. And I see that the workload of this post holder is very heavy. So I support the administration's proposal to retain the time-limited posts. Last year, the administration proposed to turn this post into a permanent one. I would have supported the proposal. But in light of the people's concern about the government's finance, now the supernumerary post is proposed to be retained. I appreciate the government's move because by this we will be able to look into the work of the post holder in 3 years' time. Now, I have a few questions. As mentioned in the paper, it is estimated that the number of defaulted works to be carried out is about 200 to 400. How do you come up with a figure? Have you taken into account the 3,000 buildings that you have not inspected on top of the 1,000 buildings that you have? Because there are some 2,000 buildings that have not complied with the fire safety directions at all. Do we have to carry out defaulted works for these 2,000 buildings? Also, how many years will it take for you to complete all the defaulted works? Undersecretary. Thank you, Chairman. And I thank the member for his support. Regarding the 200 to 400 buildings that would likely be subject to defaulted works, we come up with a figure based on our inspection and the conditions of the buildings that we noticed during our joint inspections with the Buildings Department. There are 14,000 target buildings, and we have already inspected 11,000 buildings. And there are still 3,000 that is outstanding. We inspect 400 per year. The reason why the estimates varies from 200 to 400 is because there are still quite a number of buildings we have not inspected. We have a lot of outreach team and support centers to assist, and we carry out defaulted works because we want to improve the buildings in Hong Kong in a more speedy manner. Chairman, as I mentioned, there's 2,000 buildings that have not complied with any directions at all. Are you confident that you don't have to carry out defaulted works for all of these 2,000 buildings? Because, well, is there any way for you to enhance the compliance rate? Because currently the rate stands at some 36%. Is rather low. Any way to improve the situation? Undersecretary, thank you. For the 2,000 buildings that don't comply with the directions at all, they don't give any reasonable excuse despite having an owner's corporation or property management company. They are not our targets. For the buildings that we're going to carry out defaulted works for, they don't have owner's corporation at all. They are mostly 3 new buildings, and the residents are mostly elderly. As for the 2,000 buildings that have not complied with the directions, we are going to instigate prosecution against them. And we want to encourage them to comply with the directions with penalty. Dr. Lo Wai-Kwok, thank you. I speak in support of the retention of the time-limited supernumerary post of a Deputy Chief Fire Officer, because the paper set out the duties of this officer. As the members mentioned, there are 14,000 target buildings under CAP 572, and we have inspected 11,000 buildings. And we have issued directions to over 10,500 buildings. Most of them have complied with the directions. Despite that, there are still duties or work to be carried out by the FSD. There are 6,000 who have made significant progress in the compliance, and 1,200 have certain level of progress, and there are 2,000 that have not complied with any direction without reasonable excuse. And as mentioned by the Undersecretary, there are a few hundred of target buildings that are 3 new buildings. And there's no way for them to establish a owner's corporation. In December last year, we passed the Fire Safety Building Ordinance 2024. And after that, the Buildings Department and the FSD can carry out defaulted works for buildings that have not complied with the directions. But I'm worried about the progress. You can only carry out defaulted works for some 10 or single-digit number of buildings per year. How long would it take for us to carry out defaulted works for all of the target buildings? I think that the FSD has the statutory duty to ensure the fire safety in all of our buildings. And the BPA have been asking for joint management of 3 new buildings. And under this joint property management mechanism, would it make it easier for you to carry out defaulted works? How are you going to expedite your progress? That's my main concern, because according to paragraph 11 of your paper, it is said that you only select 10 to 12 target buildings to carry out defaulted works. I'm worried about the progress.
Undersecretary, the FSD takes a risk-based approach to prioritizing its tasks. Now, for buildings with zero compliance, those have no reasonable excuse. That's why we decided to prosecute those owners. Now, for buildings trying to comply with the standards, we are handing out handheld extinguishers, fire blankets, and smoke detectors. That's to improve the fire safety of those buildings so that the effort can continue. Now, as for joint property management, that also helps, because in those cases, the smoke stop doors and means of fire escape will be something that someone will have to keep an eye on. Indeed, we have many targeted buildings. We will be able to cover up to only 60 buildings per year, but that's a pilot scheme only. There are more than 480 fire safety contractors. We have put the information online. This is to ensure greater transparency so that building owners in need can access the information. We have to find a way to put together the resources so that the government can perform the defaulted works, and that will require the coordination from a deputy chief fire officer. Chairman, one more comment. I commend the FSD's work. The FSD is pragmatic. In July 2023, there was a facilitation measure allowing fixed fire hydrants to be connected to government mains. That helps buildings that cannot put water tanks in the building. That's pragmatic. So in terms of other requirements and standards, please keep up this pragmatic approach. Can we relax where possible so that we uphold fire safety and also overcome problems where buildings simply cannot install certain devices? Mr. Perry, every fire is one too many. Fire safety at old buildings is top of mind for many people, and that's a pressing matter. We need to fix that. Hardware is just part of the problem. Software also warrants attention. No amount of inspection will do any good without any ongoing and follow-up inspections. Problems will come back. I have read through the paper. I've listened to the opening remarks of the Undersecretary, and this covers CAP 502, 636, and CAP 572. 3 ordinances, 17,000 buildings involving massive amounts of work. That's why this proposal is about keeping the post I supported. Now, my questions. We keep this post for 3 years. We know what this post holder will have to do. It's a lot of work. But there is also non-directorate support staff. Now there are 239 people, non-directorate permanent posts. And then in this financial year, there will be an extra 11 non-directorate permanent posts, so altogether 250. So how many additions in this financial year? Even when you have 250 people, so each person covers 68 buildings on average, is that appropriate? Resource issues are top of mind for everyone. So can we get other officers involved so that we don't need all the way to 250 people? So under secretary, it's about non-directorate support staff. Now for the 11 extra posts, non-directorate posts, now we're taking the same number of posts away from other divisions of the FSD. So there's no net growth of the FSD. That's what we mean by flexible redeployment of resources. That's not enough, honestly. When we have to inspect external walls, for example, this post will have to coordinate the work, and that means we will have to redeploy other FSD officers. After the new Lucky House fire, more frequent inspections were needed, so the FSD had to deploy its officers from other divisions. That's an example of how the FSD is redeploying its resources. Mr. Benson Look. Fire safety issues at old buildings are top of mind for many people, and that's a problem for Hong Kong at large. There's ongoing work when it comes to fire safety at old buildings for the FSD, and that requires a constant stream of resources. Given the fiscal deficit, the proposal now is to keep the post as a supernumerary post. It's a compromise solution. It's a modest request. 3 years from now, the post will expire, and then Electrical will get to review the necessity and measure the success of this post, and then we can decide whether it's value for money. Fire safety at old buildings requires ongoing and massive work. I just wonder if having a time-limited supernumerary post is a long-term solution. Given the heavy workload, once the fiscal position improves, can we consider turning this post permanent? Can we consider making that permanent in the future? A couple of days ago at the panel on security, we discussed registered fire safety engineers, and then the government told us there would be a bill to be tabled in the first half of this year. For that proposal, we want to get engineers involved so that we can grow the pie when it comes to fire safety certificates, etc. Given the fiscal deficit, we have to cut expanding. We also want to boost efficiency. So my question is, RFEs, how much of a difference can RFEs help in terms of fire safety for old buildings under secretaries? Now, we wanted to turn this DCFO into a permanent post, but we have considered the government's fiscal position and members' views, so we decided to keep this post as a time-limited post subject to review in 3 years' time on RFEs. Our first preliminary goal is to cover licensed establishments, that is, food license premises. If all licensed premises go for RFEs, we will be able to save resources for 30% of the acceptance tests. We would be simply doing roughly 75% of subsequent reviews, so we can redeploy the resources saved to other areas, such as fire safety for old buildings. Third-party certification of fire safety warrants caution. The FSD has been performing the work since the 1950s, so we have to tread cautiously. Thank you. Dr. Starley. This is a proposal to keep the post of a Deputy Chief Fire Officer for building safety. That's work under CAP 572. I support this proposal. With the fiscal deficit, we have to be cautious with any establishment proposals. Safety comes first in any circumstances. CAP 572 was amended with new ideas from the government. The work needs to be done. The proposal here is not creating a new post, it's keeping an existing supernumerary post. I support this, but I have expectations. I've shared my thoughts on the amended CAP 572. The work will take a long time to finish. For the lay community, the FSD follows strict standards. To discharge a fire safety direction, it would take years. So while we uphold safety, can we streamline the work? Can we adopt artificial intelligence? Can we invite the FSD to update us on the progress with regard to the use of technology? Now, on manpower, this has to do with safety and CAP 572, fire safety for old buildings. Hong Kong has many old buildings. The fire hazard is there. We should keep this post indeed. But given the looming cuts, my question is there room for saving resources anywhere in the department? On complying with fire safety directions, the FSD conducts joint inspections with the buildings department. The FSD looks at the fire safety installations, such as hose reels, whereas the buildings department looks at the building plans, whether certain structures are changed or the fire stop doors are removed. Take the new Lucky House as an example. The fire insulation walls were gone in the case of new Lucky House. And those massive works can only be performed when you have a massive rehabilitation or repair project. As Mr. Benson Lok said earlier, we take a pragmatic approach. In some buildings, where you cannot put a water tank without massive works, we now allow connection with the we now allow the fire hydrant to be connected with the government water mains, and that saves time. Undersecretary, for a layperson, we get it if it takes a year to discharge a fire safety direction. 2 years is fine, but in other cases, it's 3, 4, 5 years. Does that make sense? Does that time frame make sense? It's mind-boggling for the lay community. Building owners may disagree over how much each owner has to contribute, and they get a quotation. In some cases, the work hasn't started in 3 years, but in some cases it takes 10 years, almost 10 years. You know, it's a staggering figure. Undersecretary, please think of a way to make it faster to comply with fire safety directions. It's about asymmetry in information. Some building owners may wonder why a single direction asks for so much. we put together, we created this building improvement support center so that all the parties can sit down together for a meeting and they can sort out what's expected so that building owners can agree and get the work started. So it's not about someone or the FSD dragging things out, it's about the parties failing to agree on what to do. So we hope that this building improvement support center can help. We only have one now in Tai Kok Tsui, but we do have plans for 2 more centers, one in Wan Chai, another in Yuen Long. And the FSD is not asking for new resources. It's simply setting out the centers through internal redeployment resources.
Mr. Chan Yong. Thank you, Chairman. If we can, by retaining the supernumerary post, continue to carry out the work, I support it. I'd like to ask about some of the details. I agree with what Dr. Sterry Lee. We try to be efficient. We try to do things right and well. All these demands have put pressure on the department. Now, without sustaining additional resources, we can carry out the work. I think that is great. According to the table, I see that there is some addition to the establishment. I know that the department is shouldering heavy workload, but is there ways for us to save resources on manpower by compressing procedures or workflow? For some procedures that involve different departments, the time taken is very long, and that affects the business community. For applications that can only be approved within a month, can you compress it to, say, a week? This will save the business costs. Can the government let us know how they can improve the efficiency by streamlining the procedures and workflow? By this, we'll support the proposal of retaining the supernumerary post even more. Undersecretary, thank you. I completely agree that we should streamline procedures and assist the owners in complying with the directions. And that's why we established this building improvement support center. And we try to provide one-stop service. As I mentioned, we're going to have a one-stop center to inspect new buildings. Every day, social cost is incurred. If we don't inspect the new buildings, I hear the members' suggestions. The Fire Services Department will continue to review our workflow and procedures to see if there is any room for further streamlining. Mr. Ho Chow. Thank you, Chairman. We're going to retain the existing supernumerary post, but not creating a new position. I think that this is very important given our tight budget. I believe that our colleagues would support the proposal because we're sustaining a fiscal deficit. As Dr. Sterry Lee said, I'd like to talk about the issue of time. My comment is not restricted to this item, but according to my experience, sometimes different government departments try to pass the buck and they cannot agree on a single decision, and that actually delay a lot of different things. While we retain the position, I hope that the government will look into whether they can streamline certain procedures. And I hope that the decision-making process can be sped up, and this is a way for us to save time. Just now, the administration said that sometimes owners cannot agree on a single decision. I know that you are going to adopt new technology, artificial intelligence. Say, when you come across disputes among owners, can you give them factual figures or numbers to convince them so that a decision can be made faster? I believe that the Undersecretary remembered that we talked about the registered fire engineer scheme yesterday at the security panel. We asked how much time can be saved by having the scheme. The Undersecretary said and told us how much time exactly can be saved by having the scheme. I hope that today the Undersecretary will be able to tell us what new technology they're going to adopt. We want to save time. To make the position cost effective. Undersecretary, on the collaboration among different departments, well, actually under the Development Bureau, there is a platform for collaboration, and we will sit down and look into whether there is any procedures to be streamlined as to how we can tell good stories of fire services and to adopt technology. I know that it's often better for us to convince people with figures on, say, trends of fire. I understand it. Thank you. Mr. Kingsley Wong. Thank you. I support the retention of the position because the workload of this post holder is very heavy. After the fire incident in New Lucky House, I see that the government have stepped up enforcement, but I hope that it can be done in a more reasonable and humane manner because, say, for example, in Yaoqing Mong district, there is a building of 67 years. The owner is of some 90 years old, and upon receipt of the summons, they were asked to attend a court hearing. And the fire services officer at the court said that because the elderly owner sustain or is suffering from dementia, and if they can substantiate that they can prove that they are not able to comply with the directions, they can apply for dismissal of the directions. Actually, the sons and daughters of this elderly couple actually sought help from the Buildings Improvement Support Center. But perhaps the staff there didn't explain things very well. So my question is how we can train the staff of the support center better. If the staff can explain to the elderly couple that they could dismiss the direction, then they wouldn't have to go to the court. Also, for buildings with a lot of elderly owners, without owners' cooperation, can the Home Affairs Department help these owners establish an owners' cooperation? Only when there's no reasonable excuse that can be given will the government instigate prosecution. Is that possible? Is it possible for the government to step up cross-departmental collaboration and only instigate prosecution as the last resort? Undersecretary, thank you. We will step up promotion and publicity. Apart from support center, we have outreach teams, and we will step up publicity. As I mentioned, we'll only prosecute when there's no reasonable excuse. The case that you quote did have reasonable excuse. These are the people that we need to help or perhaps carry out defaulted works for. Some owners are worried about the cost of the defaulted works. But there is actually a number of subsidy for defaulted works. When we carry out defaulted works for building, we will help them apply for the subsidy. For a building of 7-story high with 14 units, the defaulted works could cost some $800,000, and each unit will have to shoulder, say, approximately $20,000 with subsidy, and we can provide payments and installment for them. So each unit will only have to pay some $350 per month. So I think that owners will be able to afford it. Thank you. The case that I quoted was rather extreme, but actually a lot of owners in 3 new buildings are rather old. We'll look into the composition of the owners. Thank you. Ms. Lydian Kwok, thank you. I support the retention of the time-limited supernumerary position. As a lot of members said, the workload of this post holder is heavy, and there is clear division of work within your government, within your department. We need to continue to safeguard or ensure the fire safety of different buildings. I think that we need to turn it into a permanent post when the government is better positioned financially in the future. I have a few questions. You talked about 3 new buildings. We have hundreds of 3 new buildings. As they are rather old and their conditions are bad. According to CAP 344, that is the Buildings Management Ordinance, the HYAB is the enforcement authority. And they have the administrative power to authorize any person to carry out the relevant duties. I wonder if the Fire Services Department will work with the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau to ensure the fire safety in buildings. For 2,000 buildings that have not complied with the fire safety directions to improve their buildings, well, I have received some cases where they've received advisory letters, warning letters, but the Treasury and the chairman of the owners corporation just left. And in the meantime, they received a number of directions and letters, and they had to go into legal proceedings. And this have put great pressure on the owners of the building. Can you look into the reason why the 2,000 buildings did not comply with the directions without any explanation? Because the case that I mentioned could be one of those buildings. Thank you. Undersecretary, I thank the member for the question. The FSD as the BD as the enforcement authority, we send a copy to the HYAB and another copy to the building because since 2018, there is a property management central platform that collects relevant information on, say, mandatory inspections of buildings and windows. HYAB have a centralized platform for that and will continue to work with them. I will ask my colleagues to step up collaboration with HYAB. Actually, we have also Fire Safety Committee in 18 districts, and members of these committees will help us in promoting fire safety and let us know what the characteristics of the buildings in the districts are.
主席，有少少時間。
Chairman, I have time left. One more comment. I just heard about this district network. Now, the emergency responder scheme has been popular. But there's been a drop in events in recent years. Can we make greater use of the emergency responder scheme? That we have enhanced the concept. We want people to also be able to use AED, automated external defibrillators. So we have this emergency responder scheme. People who know a variety of things with different skills. So there's a change in the function. Mr. Lawrence Tang. I support keeping this supernumerary post. I have some questions. It's a 3-year post. Hundreds of 3-new buildings are out there. And then tens of thousands of buildings require inspections or review. So how many buildings can we cover in the next 3 years in terms of inspections under CAP 572? How many buildings can we cover in 3 years? Do we have a plan? After all, this post will come under review again in 3 years' time. As other members touched on, the paper says we are keeping this Deputy Chief Fire Officer. It's a management position. So under this position, how many officers specifically help them? I'm not talking about people you enlist from other departments, other divisions to help out. I'm talking about people specifically dedicated to assisting, supporting this DCFO. Having an extra management officer without frontline support will lead to problems because you have more commanders but no extra frontline soldiers, and that will mean a tough situation for frontline people. So how many people work under this DCFO, Undersecretary? This DCFO covers not just building inspections but also defaulted works. First, the inspections. Our target is to cover 400 buildings every year, so we can cover 1,200 buildings over 3 years. And then there is follow-up, sending directions, etc. On defaulted works, we want to cover 10 buildings in the first year as a pilot scheme, and then we cover 20 to 60 buildings in each subsequent years. Of course, the works may take 5 to 6 years to finish for one building. Now for the office, under the Deputy Chief Fire Officer Building Improvement, there will be a standalone office, roughly 250 people dedicated to the task. Their work includes inspections and also the improvement works. And about the non-directorate staff. The non-directorate staff. There are staff members supporting this officer. You said you are redeploying people from other divisions. Now we are adding 11 officers to this division, but we are taking officers from other divisions of the FSD, so that's internal redeployment. We're using technology, saving manpower, so we can redeploy some of the manpower. In other cases, we have found room to redeploy officers internally in various ways. Ms. Eunice Young. Members wondered when we can cover all the backlog. Target 14,000 buildings, 11,000 covered, so 3,000 left. But we can only cover 400 buildings left. Over the past few years, we could only cover 400 buildings each year, roughly 400 buildings per year. 400 buildings per year. So you will need 7 to 8 years to clear the backlog. This supernumerary post will only be 3 years. So you probably have to keep extending this post before you can clear the backlog. And we haven't come to the directions yet. 60% of the cases have yet to fully comply with the directions, and then we heard about prosecutions, etc. Prosecution does come with a deterrent effect, $200,000 in fines, plus a fine for each day. So should we step up prosecutions? I haven't heard any prosecution figures. Now for recalcitrant people, holdouts, for those cases, how hard do we go? Can we go further? Can we double down on prosecutions? If you prosecute just 1% of the cases, that's too little. So how will the FSD step up enforcement for the directions, and how can you do a better job in prosecution, Undersecretary? I note the members' comment. Indeed, after inspections, we have to issue the fire safety directions or the fire hazard abatement notices. So there is follow-up work for each inspection. We also have to bear in mind whether there are enough contractors to perform the works needed to discharge the directions. And when contractors are overloaded with work, the prices may go up. So we take a risk-based approach. We look at the building structure. Is it a building with just one staircase? Is it a composite building? Is it just a domestic building? We also look out for possible high-risk activities in setting our priorities in inspections. Targeted buildings don't mean they have fire hazards. We're simply saying we want those buildings to align their fire standards with the present day, or rather the 1987 standards. We're not saying targeted buildings have immediate fire safety risks. We simply want to align their fire safety standards. On prosecutions, in 2023, 300 prosecutions, we tried to advise building owners to perform the works, and then 2024 came the new Lucky House fire, so we stepped up prosecutions. Prosecutions quadrupled to 1,400. Now for the 2,000 cases, no reasonable excuse, no attempt at compliance. We will continue to perform inspections and prosecute the owners. Ms. Yunus-Young. My second question is about technology. The government pledged greater use of technology. Dr. Starry Lee also suggested using technology in processing applications. Most new buildings adopt the BIM model for building management. And that should be able to speed up building inspections and fire safety. The government pledged greater use of technology in the inspection. So I wonder what technologies there are in helping inspections, Undersecretary. For old buildings, we send officers to have a look. Those officers also bring with them devices. In most cases, officers check the fire safety installations. They check the hose reel. Sometimes the hose isn't there, or the hose isn't connected to the fire hydrant. So we still rely on people, officers, checking the devices. But when we come to an advanced, a later stage, we feed the information from the inspections into our big data, and then we find out the high-risk cases, and then we prioritize the inspections. So different inspections will follow, such as those focusing on the means of escape and the smoke stop doors. Those inspections also help officers familiarize themselves with the structure of the buildings. And then at the back end, we have big data helping us. 15 members have spoken. I have observed a few things. Most members support this proposal to keep the position. And there's a long-term need for this post. So let's review this matter in 3 years' time on whether to make this post permanent. Members also suggested streamlining procedures so that directions can be discharged faster. I also want to suggest alternatives. Our fire safety ordinances are more stringent than neighboring regions. Meeting Hong Kong standards can be challenging. Dialogue matters. I'm delighted to hear there is a support centers. The logistics sector holds regular meetings with the FSD and the Lens Department. We talk about fire safety work. More dialogue will be helpful, so let's step up that work too. So we now come to voting. Will members in favor of the proposal in EC number 2024-25, number 9, please raise their hands. Those against the proposal, please raise their hand. No. I think a majority of members voted in favor of this proposal. This proposal is endorsed. We now vote on whether we recommend further discussion of this item by the Finance Committee. In accordance with paragraph 48 of the Establishment Subcommittee procedure, I now put this motion to a vote that this subcommittee recommends further discussion by the Finance Committee of the proposal in paper EC 2024-25 number 9, which has been endorsed by this subcommittee. I remind members, if this motion is passed, that means this subcommittee recommends further discussion of this paper by the FC. If this motion is negative, that means this subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of this paper by the FC. Will members in favor of the motion please raise their hands? No. Will members against the motion please raise their hands? Please put down your hand. I think a majority of members voted against this motion. This motion is negative. This subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of the proposal in EC number 2024-29-5 number 9 by the FC. We now come to the next item. That's EC 2024-25 number 10. This has to do with the Immigration Department. This proposal is about keeping a time-limited supernumerary post of Assistant Director of Immigration at DSC2 or D2 equivalent, with effect from the 1st of April this year or with immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee, whichever is the later, up to the 31st of March 2027, to continue to steer the handling of non-refoulement claims and step up the claimant-related measures. On the 3rd of December 2024, the administration briefed the panel on security. Joining us for this item today are Mr. Michael Chuk, Undersecretary for Security, Principal Assistant Secretary for Security, Ms. Joyce Chen, Mr. Choi Ting-yet, Assistant Director of Immigration Removal Assessment and Litigation. Ms. Carmen Khan is not here, so on her behalf, I will read out the gist of discussion at the panel level. The panel on security discussed at its meeting On the 3rd of December 2024, the proposed retention for 2 years of a time-limited supernumerary post of Assistant Director of Immigration, Removal Assessment and Litigation in the Immigration Department. Members were deeply concerned that many unsubstantiated non-refoulement claimants filed unjustified judicial review applications and used other means to prolong their illegal stay in Hong Kong, where they took up work illegally or committed other criminal offenses. Members noted. The officer serving as this Assistant Director of Immigration would work to boost the overall efficiency of the Immigration Department in screening non-refoulement claims. They urged the administration to enhance such efforts on all fronts. This included faster implementation of the Advanced Passenger Information System in full to prevent potential abusers of non-refoulement claims from boarding flights to Hong Kong. Working with the judiciary to explore a streamlined procedure for the application for leave for judicial review, making good use of detention spots, and strengthening collaboration with the major source countries of non-refoulement claimants to speed up the removal of unsubstantiated claimants. Given the large number of claimants in Hong Kong for various reasons, and the stream of potential abusers of such claimants arriving in Hong Kong, members expressed concern over whether the proposed retention was long enough and about the administration's performance indicators for the Immigration Department's screening of such claims. The administration responded to members' questions and concerns at the meeting. The panel supported the submission of the proposal to this subcommittee for scrutiny. 10 members, or rather, Undersecretary, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Chairman. The administration attached a lot of importance to bogus refugees. We try to process the non-refoulement claims procedures as soon as possible and repatriate unsubstantiated claimants in order to minimize the negative impact caused to the community as a whole and the risk that they pose. Over the past year, under the leadership of the Assistant Director, we have adopted a multi-pronged approach to process the non-refoulement claims. We have achieved some progress. The Hong Kong Police Force and the Immigration Department work with the mainland authorities to intercept non-ethnic Chinese illegal immigrants. And the peak of illegal immigration have gone from 380 to 60. And the drop is as high as 84%. In order to lower the incentives of immigrants coming to Hong Kong, we have inspected 13,200 workplaces that are suspected to be employing illegal immigrants. And we have streamlined the processing of application for leave of judicial review and claims. And we have also increased the number of detention centers for non-refoulement claimants. And we will continue to increase the number of detention places, and hopefully by 40 within this year. And in 2024, the Immigration Department have deported 2,219 non-refoulement claimants. And comparing to 1,450 last year, the increase is as high as 24%. Because if they continue to stay in Hong Kong, the humanitarian assistance that we offer would amount to $150 million. However, there are still challenges posed to us, and there are still things that we should work on. There are 15,800 non-refoulement claimants that are still staying in Hong Kong due to various reasons. We'll continue to intercept at source and work with mainland and Macau on tripartite collaboration and combat illegal employment and illegal immigration. And since September 2024, we have implemented an advanced passenger information system to bar travelers from coming to Hong Kong. when we suspect that they are going to file for non-refoulement claimants. And we believe that by the end of this year, that is Q3, we'll be fully implementing the system. And we have been in close liaison with counsel generals of various sources of origins of the non-refoulement claimants, and we have been processing applications for talent admission schemes and the visas for non-ethnic Chinese Hong Kong residents to the mainland. We have not increased our manpower. We try to shoulder these responsibilities by internal redeployment. So we hope to retain this position for 2 years in order to expedite the processing of the non-refoulement claims and to lower government expenditure. This assistant director, removal assessment and litigation will continue to supervise the work of non-refoulement claims. I hope that the members will support the retention of the position. Thank you. There are 11 members who have pressed the button. I'll read out the names. Ms. Yong Ha-yan, Mr. Tan Ka-piu, Mr. Chen Ha-ken, Mr. Chao Shu-chung, Mr. Edmund Wong, Mr. Kingsley Wong, Mr. Yu Pak-len, Mr. Ten Fei, Dr. Junius Ho, Ms. Judy Chen, and Dr. Lo Wai-kwok. 4 minutes per member. I believe that we'll overrun. I'll extend the meeting by 15 minutes, therefore. After Mr. Tan Ka-piu has spoken, I'll draw the line. Ms. Eunice Yong. Thank you, Chairman. I support the item, but I have to declare that I am a duty lawyer that have processed non-refoulement claims. I know that the government has been combating non-refoulement claims over the past few years at source, and I see that the Immigration Department has worked with overseas authorities to combat such cases at source. But based on the cases that we've processed, some of these claims were filed by syndicates. And actually, at different boundary and control points, there are criminals that would take care of these immigrants. So I wonder if there is any interdepartmental or intergovernmental collaboration so that this kind of syndicate will no longer exist, because a lot of non-refoulement claimants told us that they were told that they could work in Hong Kong legally, and there were agents that arranged them to come to Hong Kong via different countries, via different modes of transport, not necessarily airlines or aircraft. And that's why a lot of these claimants come to Hong Kong. I see that the government is trying to extend the detention period, increase detention places. But how do we combat syndicated operation that work with professionals to help these non-refoulement claimants? Undersecretary, let me talk about how these non-refoulement claimants usually come to Hong Kong. Actually, 40% of these claimants come to Hong Kong illegally, 50% of them overstayed while they come here legally, and over half of them were foreign domestic helpers. So we see a few problems. That is, illegal smugglers who arranged these claimants to come to Hong Kong via mainland or changed their passports in order to falsify their identity to come to Hong Kong. Some of them come here illegally, some of them just come to the police and ask the police to arrest them, and some of them come here illegally and work before they were arrested. And we do see a syndicated operation. And that's why the Immigration Department have been working with the police to mount operation. And we also work with the enforcement agencies in the Guangdong province. After normal travel has resumed since the COVID, we did realize that there were a lot of non-refoulement claimants coming to Hong Kong via the mainland. And that's why we see over 400 claims being filed every month. With our efforts, there are only 60 to 70 claims filed every month. For overstayers, foreign domestic helpers gave us some strange reasons for overstaying, but we believe that some foreign domestic helpers were misled into thinking that they can continue to work in Hong Kong after filing non-refoulement claims. And we have talked to the consulate generals of the places of origins of these foreign domestic helpers. At the peak, there are 33 to 35% of foreign domestic helpers have filed non-refoulement claims. Currently, the percentage is about 20. There were claimants who hold other passports. Now, with the advanced passenger information system, we want to intercept them at source so that they will not enter Hong Kong at all. Because after they have arrived in Hong Kong, even if we refuse their entry, they will still be able to stay in Hong Kong. The most direct way is to bar them from boarding the plane. Mr. Tenkapio, thank you. I support the retention of this position. I believe that there is a consensus in the community. Now, we're in February 2025. I wonder how much we've spent in 2024 on these 15,000 bogus refugees. Is it really $1.4 billion as some people have claimed? I know that, and I see that in the paper there are some new strategies of the government, and the government have sent or repatriated 2,219 claimants. But as far as I understand, in 2024, there are 2,800 new claimants. So we have a net increase every year. And it seems that the snowball is rolling. Is there any way for us to eradicate the problem completely? Should we hold the employment agencies responsible? Because some of these claimants come with the help of these agencies. We should not allow the foreign domestic helpers to file. And is it helpful for us to withdraw from the convention? Now, normal travel has resumed. There's nothing prohibiting us from repatriating the non-refoulement claimants. Is there any new ideas? Because I know that the frontline officers have been working overtime, and they are in danger. Now, in the last financial year, we have spent some $1 billion on this.
On the second point, foreign domestic helpers, they file non-refoulement claims on various grounds. Many cite their sexual orientations being inconsistent or not permitted by their home countries. That's one reason we've seen. We believe some people may have egged them on. So we work with consulates general on education for foreign domestic helpers. From what we know, the consulates general also work with the local employment referral agencies in those countries. From what we know, the focus will be on promotion. Now, on the convention, the UN convention, our country has announced that the convention will continue to apply to Hong Kong. Our country shows commitment. Our country is not for confrontation. Our country doesn't just pull out of a convention. But we have sought legal advice. Even if our country allows Hong Kong to pull out of the convention, many parts of the convention are incorporated into our local legislation, and they're part of our Hong Kong Bill of Rights ordinance, and then they are CFA precedent. That's why we have the unified screening mechanism. At different times, the CFA handed down judgments against the government, so we changed our system. So that's a complicated matter. On detention, there are many views. There's a realistic problem. We have to find a place to put people there, and that will also require massive manpower. Our Correctional Services Department, roughly 8,000 or so prisoners. The total cost is $5.5 billion for the CSD, and that's a large sum. Mr. Gary Chan, the Undersecretary said we spent $1 billion on the bogus refugees last year. It's not just last year. Hey, the year before and the year before that, many years from the past, they add up. Starting from 2014, we put in place the USM that year, 2014. Up to now, we have spent $11 billion over all these years. All that is needless spending. And we're not being fair. We're not doing right by Hong Kong people. If we can extend this post and then we save $1 billion every year, that's worth it. Still, we have expectations for this post. The Immigration Department has a target for its own. Each year, you repatriate 1,320 people. Last year, you hit the target. You repatriated 2,219 people. But we have 15,000 claimants outstanding. So can we have a higher goal, 2,000 or so each year? That will still take you many years to clear the backlog. Can we raise the performance indicator? Can we set a higher goal than last year? Each year, you remove more than 2,200 people. That would be more acceptable to LegCo. Can you give us a pledge, Undersecretary? Undersecretary. I note Mr. Chen's comment. That goal is our minimum. We're not stopping at the goal. The first year, the goal was 1,200, and then the second year, 1,320. We're working hard. We repatriated 2,219 people. Many factors are at play. One factor is how we verify someone's identity. So we're stepping up collaboration with consulates general so that we can do even better in verification. Once we secure the papers, we can remove those people. On our performance indicators, of course, we want to be able to remove all 15,000 people, but that's unrealistic in 1 year. We want to cover at least 1,500 a year. Of course, I myself want to be more ambitious. As for the goal for next year, I will talk to my colleagues, and we will have to look at what we have at hand. we'll see how many are ready for removal. Now, 15,800 people, 8,600 people, 80 or 54% have legal proceedings, primarily judicial review proceedings, so we cannot send them away yet. 2,800 people are waiting for verification. So those ready for removal, roughly 900 people. So we have verified their identity. We can send them away anytime. We're now trying to move faster with verifying the identity for the 2,700 people so that we can proceed with removal quickly. Mr. Chao Siu-chung. Each year, we have been spending billions of dollars for non-refoulement claimants. That's a heavy burden on our finances. The community's consensus is to go tougher on this problem. I support the Immigration Department's proposal so that we can move faster in screening out the abusers of non-refoulement claimants. I'm looking at paragraph 7, illegal workers. Bogus refugees are a rampant problem, and that has much to do with shortcomings in how we combat the problem of illegal workers. We're not sending a message clear enough to people in certain countries that it's illegal for them to work here. They have to go to jail for that. So can we step up work on this? Paragraph 7 on inspections for illegal work. The target is to do 13,000 inspections each year. In terms of arrestees, 600 or so arrests. $15,000 people in Hong Kong. Claimants. How many of them are taking up illegal work? Have we covered most of these people doing illegal work? These people may be doing the illegal work. They keep a low profile. You don't find out until a long time later. Can we step up enforcement? Can we achieve a greater deterrent effect? Undersecretary. On cracking down on illegal work. In some cases, the non-refoulement claims are an excuse for people to stay in illegal work. That's why cracking down on illegal work is a priority in enforcement. Our goal is to cover at least 12,000 workplaces each year. We arrested more than 600 people last year, and then separately 250 people were arrested by the Labor Department because employers are also responsible. We don't just make a single arrest. In one case, an employer hired people and then sent them out as dishwashers. That employer was convicted and was imprisoned. In some cases, there were large fines because the employer hired 4 illegal workers. For each such worker, the fine was $25,000, so altogether the fine was $100,000. Is that enough? No. On cracking down on illegal work, the Immigration Department will keep up with inspections. They will stick to the intelligence-led approach, and they will work with the police. Where warranted, they will mount joint operations. One comment, Chairman. I put in a written question last July. The government's reply gave me figures. It's about the prosecution of employers. The number has been falling over recent years. Meanwhile, only 60 to 70% of the illegal workers were prosecuted. but the employers hiring illegal workers were prosecuted in smaller proportions, from 30 down to 21%. Undersecretary. Sometimes we cannot find enough evidence to show who hired the illegal workers. They may be hiring people to serve as food deliverers. In that case, it's hard to find the employer. And forgery of documents is also involved. Someone may have shared their identity papers with others for them to undertake work. So we have to investigate those cases. Mr. Edmund Wong. This proposal was discussed at the panel on security meeting on December 3rd last year. We now have 15,000 claimants in Hong Kong. Last year we sent away 2,200 people, so that would take 7 years to cover all the backlog. So we will have to keep extending this post in the foreseeable future. And there's a steady stream of arrivals of non-refoulement claims, so the arrivals cancel out the removal figures. At the root of the problem is an economic incentive. At the panel meeting last year, the Bureau told us there would be publicity, there would be work to crack down on illegal work. I'm looking at the job description for this post holder. 6 tasks. None covers promoting the message of not hiring illegal workers. We heard the inspection figures. That was a point raised by Mr. Bill Tang and Mr. Chao Siu-chung. I know it's a policy of the Immigration Department, but if that work is not part of the job description of an Assistant Director of Immigration, so it's not clear who's taking charge of the work. So can we add that to the duties and responsibilities so that this assistant director will know they have the responsibility to spread the word? No one should be hiring illegal workers, so that we can reduce the incentive for illegal workers to come here. Now, to respond to the member's question, there's an assistant director dedicated to enforcement efforts, specifically on cracking down on illegal work and publicity. The Immigration Department will be promoting, spreading this message. Employers have the duty to check whether the workers have the identity papers to take up work. We are an externally oriented economy. We have visa-free arrangements with 170 regions around the world. We don't want potential abusers of non-refoulement claims to come here. That's why we have in place the Advanced Passenger Information System. By the 3rd quarter of this year, all airlines will be using this system so that we can bar those high-risk people from boarding a flight to Hong Kong. Once again, I thank the member for his question. Anything to add from the government on cracking down on illegal work? There's an assistant director, but can we step up the promotion? You're cracking down, you're not promoting. We can certainly do that. Now, the API system, at the panel discussion last year, the Undersecretary said the top 3 countries were Indonesia, Vietnam, and Pakistan. Indonesia, 60%. Those people arrived in Hong Kong legally. Cracking down on illegal workers is the priority. Those people landed in Hong Kong legally and then they filed a non-refoulement claim. Undersecretary, I note the member's concern. We have 300,000 foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong. They do important work in Hong Kong. So we focus on promotion. We tell foreign domestic helpers that filing non-refoulement claims is not something they should do as a pretext for doing illegal work. If we catch them once, they will never get a work visa again. So we've been working on that.
多謝主席，我係
Mr. Kingsley Wong, thank you. I support the retention of the supernumerary posts. I few questions. It is said that we have to spend $1 billion on humanitarian support. Does that include the salary for this assistant director and the supporting staff? Are these $60 million included in the $1 billion that we spent on non-refoulement claimants? Now we spent some $1 billion on these claimants. I wonder if the government have conducted national security assessment with 15,000 non-refoulement claimants staying in Hong Kong. Do they pose security threats to Hong Kong's community? It seems that our speed of repatriation does not catch up with the number of arrivals. We should not keep the snowball rolling. We should tackle the problem at source by amending legislation. Will the administration consider that? Because it seems that this issue cannot be resolved, and we may have to create additional position in order to solve the problem. Is there any ways for us to resolve it altogether? Illegal workers. As I mentioned, a lot of bogus refugees deliver food or work as food delivery workers. Apart from immigration department, some of these refugees use the food bank card to enter residential developments to deliver food. How do we regulate the food delivery platform so that these bogus refugees cannot work as food delivery workers? Some security guards actually accept reconnaissance as proof of identity to enter the buildings. Actually, a security guard should not let these workers go up the residential buildings by using the reconnaissance as a proof of identity. Undersecretary, thank you. The $1 billion cover 4 categories of expenditure. The first group is humanitarian assistance. The second category is the cost of legal representatives because we're obliged to assign one. Third is the administrative cost of, say, purchasing air tickets for them. Fourth category is expenditure on judicial or on appeals. So the $1 billion cover all these categories. The largest expenditure is humanitarian aid. Is the $60 million of salary included? Yes. The immigration department staff salary is covered under the administrative cost. Second question on national security assessment. We never neglect our responsibility in this area because some of these claimants may participate in terrorism, and actually their places of origin are oftentimes countries identified by United Nations as bed for terrorism. And we do have a working group led by a senior assistant commissioner of police and we worked with them on this. Now, please be succinct, Undersecretary. On the time taken for repatriation, well, that it hinges on a number of different factors. We often took a long time to verify the identity of a person. And I saw for the first time myself that some passports were handwritten. And to be frank, Pakistanis and Indians look sometimes very similar. And it takes time for us to verify the identity of these claimants. As for illegal workers delivering food, well, we've been asking the food delivery platforms to verify the identity of their staff. And we ask the police to step up publicity and promotion to let the security guards know what they should do. Next, Mr. Yu Pak-lan. Thank you, Chairman. The expenditure that we spend on handling non-refoulement claims is very substantial, and this is a burden of our society. We have been discussing this issue for quite some time on the retention of this position. Well, I support it because it's necessary for us to do so. How do we intercept the claimants as source? Because 40% of these claimants come illegally. Some of them go to the mainland first and come to Hong Kong via boat. You said that you will work with the mainland and the Macau and step up intelligence exchange with law enforcement agencies in those places to combat illegal immigration in a targeted manner. I wonder if the mechanism is actually effective because the number keeps rising. And the mainland is offering more visa-free arrangements for a lot of different countries. And the number is rising also these days. Will that worsen our situation? Will you work or talk to the mainland authorities on how we can intercept a source? The industry have been asking for relaxation of travel visa restrictions because we want to attract tourists from the Middle East, Vietnam, and countries alike. For travelers coming on a travel visa, I believe that very few of them come here and file for non-refoulement claims. But I'd like to know more about the situation. In September, the advanced passenger information system will be implemented fully. I think that would assist the administration in prohibiting these abusers from boarding the planes. Can we further enhance efficiency? Undersecretary. Well, 40% of the claimants come here illegally. That is true. We've been working with the Guangdong province closely. As far as I understand, the province have adopted administrative measures to control the movement of certain people in their territory. That's why the figures have dropped from 400 to a few dozens these days. A country is opening up, apart from 144 countries. I know that they are offering visa-free arrangement to 200 countries, and there are bilateral arrangement for some countries. We have a regular mechanism on anti-smuggling and illegal immigration with the mainland and Macau, and this is an effective mechanism. Now, on travel visas for ASEAN countries, for non-refoulement claimants staying in Hong Kong, most of them come from Indonesia and Vietnam. And most of the Indonesians staying are in form of domestic helper. For Vietnamese claimants, they are overstayers mostly. We have relaxed a lot of visa arrangements for ASEAN countries. The Immigration Department adopts the risk-based approach as always. For travelers that need to supplement further information, the time taken for processing may be longer. Is there other ways for us to facilitate tourists coming to Hong Kong, say in tour groups? We'll look into it. Third, on API, that is Advanced Passenger Information System. The system will help us in combating the issue, but there were non-refoulement claimants who were repatriated, come back to Hong Kong with another passport, and we relied on their fingerprints to identify them. We're trying to improve our system in the meantime. There are still 4 members who would like to speak, and we have to vote on the item. I hope that the members will observe the 4-minute time limit. Mr. Tang Fei. Thank you, Chairman. My question is similar to that of Mr. Yu. The 2 questions may be contradictory. First, I know that there are Vietnamese government officials who have talked to the SAR government on how they can repatriate overstayers more quickly. They ask us to expedite the process, and the Vietnamese government said that they could send vessels here to repatriate their residents or citizens back to the country. Using vessels may be more efficient for us to repatriate Vietnamese overstayers. Is it possible? My second question, it may seem contradictory with the first question. Well, Vietnam has been, I know that there is a 30-day visa-free access for Vietnamese entering mainland, but we don't have such arrangement. Can we align our policies so that we can offer the same visa-free access to Vietnamese? Thank you. 2 questions. Undersecretary. Thank you. Let me first talk about the issue of Vietnam. Well, the former and the current counselor has been working with us. I know that Vietnam is the only country that sent a team of staff to come to Hong Kong to verify the identity so that we don't have to just rely on the consulate general. But I've never heard about the vessel arrangement because the journey is long and the arrangement is rather complicated. The country is arranging for aircraft to send their citizens back home. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Vietnamese government to expedite the repatriation arrangement. Although we have large numbers of Vietnamese refugees here, but the number of repatriation is also high. Now, on immigration control, we adopt a one country, two systems principle. And this is the principle. Well, we have our independent or separate immigration policies, and that is well respected by our country. Now, on the tour group arrangement or tour group in, group out arrangements, we're looking into it. And the Vietnamese government have been asking for us to provide convenience for them to, say, carry out business in Hong Kong, and we are working on that. One of our focuses is that we try to attract Vietnamese young people to come to Hong Kong to study because their economy is growing. We want to have more Vietnamese who are young to come to Hong Kong, study and work.
後一句局長
Chairman, one comment on bringing more young people from Vietnam to Hong Kong for studies and work. I commend that spirit. Now, I have a question. Say you have an overstayer from Vietnam in Hong Kong. They apply for non-refoulement. You cannot send them away. And you have to verify this person's identity. Can we just send this person away whenever a boat arrives? For a Vietnamese overstayer, they are willing to leave. They simply lack the means to arrange passage. We can arrange with the Vietnamese consulate general. As long as they don't apply for non-refoulement, things move quickly. Dr. Junius Ho. I want to clarify a point with the Undersecretary. Paragraph 26. It says there are non-directorate support staff members. Now, at the previous item, the non-directorate support officers were internally redeployed within the FST. So here, for the Immigration Department, are we talking about 76 officers redeployed internally, or will the 76 people be simply let go of once the time-limited post goes out? The 76 posts are non-directorate time-limited posts, so that's misleading. So you're not creating one post, you're creating 77 posts. The 76 posts are non-directorate posts. I don't care if it's non-directorate, but you are really creating one directorate post plus 76 non-directorate posts. $3.87 million for the directorate officer, and then you have 76 non-directorate officers. Altogether, $61.4 million. Mr. Kingsley Wong asked where the money is from. You said it's from the $1 billion. You're not extending one position, you're extending 77 positions. Is that right? We're extending the directorate post. I don't think the paper is clear. I thought we were extending one position. I was thinking you still have 76 people if we don't allow the one post to be extended. But this situation here is different from the case of the FST. With the FST, they redeployed their own officers. But here, the 76 posts here are in a different case from the situation with the FST. This requires clarity. Undersecretary, as a matter of government procedure, when we have a time-limited supernumerary post at the directorate level, legislative approval is needed. As for non-directorate level time-limited posts, the government can make an internal decision about that. We're here to seek legislature's approval to extend the directorate post. We have spelled out clearly in the paper the support officers. I don't think the paper is misleading. I can invite my colleagues from the CSB, Civil Service Bureau, to explain to the members the procedure, but the paper has laid everything on the table. I raised this question after reading this. This is important. Everyone says, let's approve this. But Mr. Kingsley Wong is smart. He spotted the matter. I heard the $1 billion figure. With the Immigration Department, you are not redeploying existing officers. To ensure clarity, we have to be clear that we're not just getting one directorate officers. It turns out there are non-directorate support officers. When you go to a restaurant, you order something, when you turn out, you have to pay for much more than what you're bargaining for, and you will be really infuriated. You find it only when you get the bill. So you should spell things out more clearly in your paper. Dr. Ho, your time's up. The Undersecretary has explained this is the established mechanism. It's nothing new, it's nothing misleading. I'm not saying the Undersecretary is misleading us. I'm saying this presentation is problematic. This is different from the FSD paper. With the previous item, it was about adding support officers, but those officers are redeployed from other divisions. Here, we're keeping the officers. So we're saying once we clear the backlog, all the support staff will be gone. We move on to the next member. Now, let's be mindful of the time. We have 10 minutes left, Ms. Judy Chan. I will be brief. Other members have raised the question about foreign domestic helpers, and then we heard about referral agencies. That's the source. Do we know if foreign domestic helpers groups are telling and teaching FDHs how to stay here, and maybe they're profiting from this? Are they breaking the law? Are there ways for us to catch them? I know this is a complex matter. 15,800 claimants in Hong Kong. That's a large number. And we're keeping this post of Assistant Director of Immigration. So can the Undersecretary tell us, out of the 15,800 claimants here, what's the longest stay among these cases? We're keeping the post for 2 more years. Let's leave aside KPIs for a moment. We're not blindly chasing after KPIs. For the 15,800 claimants, what goals are we trying to achieve in the next 2 years, and what are some challenges we can see? Undersecretary. For foreign domestic helpers, they cited different reasons for non-refoulement claims. Some cited their sexual orientation, which is not allowed, which is at odds with the religion of their home country. Others cited loans. Still others cited personal safety concerns. They may be attacked because of some personal feuds in their home countries. And claimants prefer certain law firms in their non-refoulement claims. But there are now improvements in place. When people seek legal aid, the claimants cannot choose their own law firms. So the focus now is more on education. Once the proceedings start, we have to follow the highest standards of fairness from the courts, so there's little wiggle room. So the assistant director talks to the consulates general all the time. We bring the consulates general up to date about the reasons cited by the claimant so that the education in the home countries can be more focused. I'm wondering, is there evidence that some so-called humanitarian groups are profiting from this? Is there evidence for this? Usually there are some groups from overseas countries. They say they focus on labor rights, sexual orientation matters. They show up under such guises. They're operating within legal boundaries. On the second question, for the 15,800 people, in some extreme cases, they've stayed over 15 years. What about the percentage? That's a small fraction, small percentage. The average figure for most cases is 45 years. The legal procedures will take at least a year or more, and then we proceed to verification of identity. There was a case that had to go through verification by 3 different consulates general. The person claims they're from one country, and then the consulate general checks it turns out there are language barriers, and it turned out this person is from a different country. Dr. Loy Kwok is still waiting to speak to make sure we have to be able to vote. So I want to extend the meeting by up to 15 minutes until we end the meeting. If members agree, we can continue. No objections. Let's proceed. Dr. Loy Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. $15,800 non-refoulement claimants in Hong Kong. That's a large number. That has led to implications in people's lives and law and order. People are not happy about the situation. This proposal is about keeping a time-limited post of Assistant Director of Immigration for 2 more years. But the problem will take more than 2 years to solve, so we support further extension when they come. Now, some questions for me. The Undersecretary told us about different measures in recent years to speed up processing and removal. But my question is, are we seeing a net growth or a net reduction in the caseload? If the caseload is reducing, how do we speed that up? How many years would it take to clear the backlog? Some people say we should detain those claimants. We shouldn't allow those people to roam free. Even with the expansion in detention facilities, you will only get 940 spots. That's still on the low side. When can we detain the claimants? Why are so many claimants allowed to roam free? The paper also covers cracking down on illegal work. I know the government is working hard. So how harsh are the penalties for hiring illegal workers? If the penalties are light, then everyone goes on to hire illegal workers. Now, my other question has to do with foreign domestic helpers, and they file non-refoulement claims. Hong Kong needs experienced foreign domestic helpers. Why will foreign domestic helpers need to file non-refoulement claims? What's in for these foreign domestic helpers filing non-refoulement claims? I thank Dr. Low for his support. We want to keep the post for 2 more years so that LegCo can continue to exercise oversight over what we do. We want to be able to deliver results in 2 years. Now, on detention, we have 2 factors to bear in mind. 1, whether a claimant poses a risk to the community. If yes, we detain that person. We once detained a rapist, but that person managed to apply for a habeas corpus order and that person got away. We appealed, and then we put this person on the wanted list, and then we managed to arrest the person. And then there's a second reason. If we decide to remove this person, we cancel the bailout conditions, and we want to be able to secure the person once we have the removal arrangements ready. But the detention will have to follow court orders, court conditions, and that means we cannot be unduly onerous. After all, it's an administrative arrangement. Now, for illegal work, the court hands out at least 1 year jail terms, and in most cases, it's more than 14 months of jail terms. As for employers, it depends on conditions, depends on circumstances. Some employers were jailed. Say you set up a company to hire those illegal workers, those employers are imprisoned. Now, on why foreign domestic helpers file non-refoulement claims, that usually happened during COVID. some foreign domestic helpers failed in job hopping because during the COVID years, the pay for foreign domestic helpers shot up. So helpers tried job hopping. Now the percentage has dropped from 30 to 20%. We still have to find out what they're doing. As I said, we focus on promotion through consulates general and employment agencies so that those foreign domestic helpers aren't misled because they will affect their future prospects of work in Hong Kong. My question goes unanswered. 15,800 people, are we seeing a net growth or a net drop? Now, for the past 2 years, things are special. We closed the boundary during the 3 COVID years, and then we reopened, and then the number shot up. We sent away 4,000 people. And then we look at their new arrivals. There's a slight net growth. It's a two-digit number. But we are confident that with immigration control, we can see a net drop in the number, such that we are removing more people than new arrivals. Members, that's all for the questions. The general sentiment is support for the proposal, but there are concerns about interception. Mr. Kingsley Wong brought up the issue of illegal workers. If we remove the incentive of illegal work, claimants won't want to come here. So you have to consider amending legislation. Otherwise, there's no end to the problem. So please consider this. I now put this item to a vote. Members in favor of the proposal in EC 2024-25 number 10, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. No. I think a majority of members voted in favor of the proposal. The proposal is endorsed. We now vote on the next motion, and that is whether we recommend further discussion of the proposal in this paper by the Finance Committee in accordance with paragraph 48 of the Establishment Subcommittee procedure. I now put this motion to a vote that this subcommittee recommends further discussion by the Finance Committee of the proposal in paper EC number 2024-2510, which has been endorsed by this subcommittee. I remind members, if this motion is passed, that means this subcommittee recommends further discussion of this paper by the FC. If, on the other hand, this motion is negative, that means this subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of the paper by the FC. Members in favor, please raise their hands. No. Members against the motion, please raise their hands. I think a majority of members voted against this motion. This motion is negative. This subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of EC 2024-25 number 10 by the FC. So that's all for the meeting today. Our next meeting will be on the 12th of February. That's next Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Thank you for joining the meeting.